Good evening, everybody. Please find comfortable seats. I'm very, very glad that you're here and that you're willing to attend a gathering with the somewhat grandiose headline, Meet the President. I keep looking around to try to catch a glimpse of him or her. Somehow it takes me back to early days in my teaching career when my students would say, Mr. Commons, and I'd turn around and look for my father. I am particularly glad that my wife, Lindsay, is here tonight, class of 1996. It's good of her to be here. Big night out for her without the kids. She gets to come and hear a speech from her husband. Very exciting for Lindsay. What a nice party that was outside, and I'm frankly a little surprised that all of you would file in here and leave the bartenders, the friendly bartenders outside to listen to me speak. But I'm, again, grateful that you've come, and I'm told that the bartenders and dessert purveyors will be outside after I have made my offering, and so I urge you to linger and have good conversations with old friends and new. The last time I was in this theater was a week ago when the full faculty, middle and upper school, came together here for a presentation from Stanford psychologist and celebrated author Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck is a researcher who's done some really fascinating work. One of the memorable things that she shared, and you can decide if it's true from your perspective, is that men are far more likely than women to agree with the following statement: I would feel comfortable expounding at length on a topic about which I know very little. I feel like I might be proving her theory tonight as I talk about Harvard-Westlake at this early juncture in my tenure. But since you're kind enough to be here, I will share some early impressions and offer some thoughts about the future and reflect a bit on the past. Reflecting on the past actually takes me back to an earlier life at Harvard-Westlake, which began about the same time as the new school did. Back in 1990, Tom Hudnut hired me to work in the admission office, which was under the direction of Elizabeth Gregory, who is here somewhere. Elizabeth, where are you? She remains the director of admission. It was under the direction at that time of Elizabeth Gregory and Debbie Reed, two of the finest people I will ever work for or with. That year, we interviewed, discussed, and decided upon the very first applicants to the newly created Harvard-Westlake School. The admission office sat above Westlake's Great Hall, a wonderful space that I'm glad I knew, just as I'm glad I knew Westlake's lower lawn and beautiful row of variegated rose bushes that set off the senior garden. I went off to Stanford to get a master's after that year, but in 1992 I was back, this time on the Harvard campus, which had become the upper school. During the ensuing half-decade, I taught English, coached varsity boys soccer, and served as a college counselor. It was during those years when I taught, coached, and counseled some of the people who are here in this audience that I discovered my calling as a school person by witnessing what could happen when a team of skilled educators devotes itself with passion and conviction to a collection of unusually talented students, all of us pursuing the old-fashioned notion that if we try hard enough, anything is possible. Possunt quia posse videntur. That's our school motto. It comes from Virgil's Aeneid, and it is loosely translated, they can because they think they can. Look at what Harvard-Westlake has become in just over 20 years because we thought we could. Nationally, even internationally prominent for multifaceted excellence, our school has become what some have called, rather evocatively, the Stanford of high schools. Back in 1991, as I was reading through piles of applicant files in that office above the Great Hall, Harvard-Westlake was still just an idea. What a thrill it was to be part of such a beginning, and what a thrill it is to be called to return to an institution in such full and glorious bloom. We have had a wonderful, remarkable start to the school year. We got underway on August 27th with an opening convocation over on the field at the upper school, where we gathered students, faculty, and staff all together in the same place for the very first time in the history of Harvard-Westlake. We bussed the entire middle school over there and back, which was a bit of a logistical challenge, but everyone from the new 7th graders to the most senior faculty veterans expressed enthusiasm for the focus on community and the establishment of this new tradition. That was on a Tuesday, and on Friday of that week, most of the school was back in the same place, storming onto the same field in celebration of the football team's upset victory over Loyola. Estimates on attendance at that game ranged from 4,000 to 6,000. Whatever the number, the atmosphere was electric, and the cheers from the Harvard-Westlake side have not stopped echoing through Coldwater Canyon. Not to be outdone, the following Friday, the girls' varsity volleyball team faced off against their rival Marymount, the reigning CIF Division I state champions, and they too pulled off an upset victory to the delight of a packed house in Taper Gymnasium. We don't win them all. Just last night, our water polo team, ranked number 2 in Southern California, faced off against Mater Dei, ranked number 1, and lost a heartbreaker. But athletics at Harvard-Westlake has reached impressive heights across the board, and if there is another high school that combines academic and athletic excellence as well as we do, I am unaware of it. You will be pleased to know that the Twitter feed for Harvard-Westlake debate is as active and exciting as the sports feed, as our debaters compete locally and nationally with the same kind of success. If you eschew Twitter for more traditional journalism, check out the Harvard-Westlake Chronicle, on paper or online, and you will enjoy news, features, and uncensored opinions in a publication that the National Scholastic Press Association has consistently honored as one of the finest school newspapers in the country. My own completely unbiased ranking places it well above the Los Angeles Times and closing in on the Wall Street Journal. The arts at Harvard-Westlake are also spectacular. In a few weeks, this stage will transform into a midsummer night in Jersey, combining Shakespeare with Jersey Shore, while Rugby Auditorium at the upper school will feature Hairspray. For Hairspray, 67 students auditioned, many of whom worked all summer to prepare for 5 days of auditions. 55 of them were cast. Chamber singers, orchestra, jazz ensemble, painting, ceramics, video. Somehow the performing and visual arts at Harvard-Westlake have grown in strength and breadth right alongside the athletic, journalism, and debate programs. Still, the academic experience remains the jewel in the crown at Harvard-Westlake, and it continues to be extraordinary. With a world-class faculty and a collection of the most talented, motivated, and intellectually passionate students we can assemble from 219 different elementary and middle schools throughout the Los Angeles area, Harvard-Westlake is able to offer a learning experience with teachers, peers, and curriculum that are unrivaled. I will spare you a litany of academic statistics and highlights to prove my point, but one recent metric of which we can be proud is that 54 of our seniors were named semifinalists in the National Merit Competition, which is based on PSAT scores and overall academic performance. 54. That's almost 20% of the senior class. Thank you. Not for me, for them. Almost 20% of the senior class, and it's almost 3% of all such honorees in the state of California. One could easily get carried away with all of this excellence. As you can see, I sometimes do. But there are reminders now and then that as impressive as our students' achievements are, they are still adolescents. Harvard-Westlake students are not immune to making mistakes. In fact, like all adolescents, they are hardwired to push and sometimes cross the boundaries that are set for them. And a critical part of the job of our school must be not only to inspire excellence, but also to teach lasting lessons of character. Sometimes, in order to do that, we have to focus on the littlest things, like picking up after ourselves. Carelessness about trash in the upper school lunch area got to be such a problem last year that head of upper school Odrius Barzdukas, who is here tonight, had signs affixed to the tabletops urging students to dispose of their trash properly. The signs did not seem to have their intended effect, so this fall he introduced the students, class by class, to a man named Gregorio Hernandez, who has been working at Harvard Westlake for 2 decades and cleans the lunch area every day. The signs have been changed to read, "Please help Gregorio keep our lunch area clean." This human reminder seems to have begun to change behavior, and it serves as an example of the kind of teaching and learning that we must not neglect, even as we celebrate all of our achievements. When people have asked me in the last few months, "What is your vision for Harvard Westlake?" I have consistently answered that I don't know yet, that our school is thriving, and that I have the luxury of listening and observing before I attempt to set forth any grand vision. I have been listening hard and watching closely, and it is clear that there are precious few places where the school can improve its academic and extracurricular programs. However, I will say that I think Harvard Westlake can and should do more to help students be mindful of our privileges, our responsibilities, and our opportunities to serve a greater good than our own goals and desires. It does seem to me that our school, like most others I know, has room for growth in this area, if only because Harvard Westlake should strive to be known as much for our character as for our excellence. One of our new character education initiatives is to carve out time in our busy days for students and teachers at the upper school to come together in classrooms, simply to talk about what matters. These sessions are called Civitalks, with a gesture to civitas, the Latin word for responsibilities of citizenship. I am part of a Civitalks group, and I have been surprised at the lack of cynicism among teenagers brought together to talk about issues of character. Really, I expected a fair amount of eye-rolling, head shaking, and heavy sighing, some indication that their precious time was being wasted, that they could be sleeping, grabbing a snack, finishing homework, or just hanging out with friends. Instead, the students were eager to listen, ready to exchange ideas, and more than willing to engage. My theory, just a theory at this point, is that there is a real appetite among our students for thinking about meaning in their lives. They work so hard and they accomplish so much, but my theory is that they are smart enough, wise enough to want to pause and ask each other, ask an adult whom they respect and who is not one of their parents, what does it all mean? Last week's Civitalks discussion was focused on what defines the Harvard Westlake community. We divided into 4 small groups, each of which used a poster board to portray its ideas. Surprisingly, all 4 groups had one idea in common. All 4 said that one thing that defines Harvard Westlake is great teachers. Perhaps this shouldn't have surprised me, since I had just read the lead opinion piece in the most recent issue of the Chronicle. Around here, the Chronicle is famously, some would say infamously, uncensored. Students can write whatever they want, so long as it has journalistic merit, and there are plenty of journalistically meritorious ways to criticize the faculty. So it is no small thing that the editor-in-chief, who happens to be here tonight, I did not know he was coming, but the editor-in-chief of the Chronicle, taking pictures of this event tonight, wrote this: "One of the opportunities we're afforded at Harvard Westlake is a chance to learn from some of the smartest and most interesting people we're likely to meet throughout our lives. Not only are our teachers knowledgeable about their respective fields of study, but many are just flat out interesting and great conversationalists. It's this luxury, and my opinion that my peers and I don't take enough advantage of it, that makes me write what will be the most ostensibly dweeby statement I've published in my time on the Chronicle. Make friends with your teachers." Jack, where are you, by the way? Jack Goldfisher, right there. It would be hard for me to overstate the teaching opportunity created by Jack's dweeby attitude. It's a willingness to be moved and inspired, to resist the natural inclination of teenagers to find adults and their ideas to be ridiculous. Harvard-Westlake students seem to me to be asking for us to focus on questions of character, whether in the form of Gregoria Hernandez or in the form of conversations with great teachers. This attitude among our students presents us with more than an opportunity. I submit that it presents us with a responsibility to teach much more than our subjects. In short, to go beyond excellence. The most important thing that I've done this fall is to start every day in the classroom. Every morning I am in English class here at the middle school with 17 eager freshmen, and I try as hard as I can to take advantage of the opportunity their eagerness for excellence presents and to take seriously the responsibility of going beyond it. We started the year with John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. Some of you will recall this poignant novella, which tells the story of a friendship between two Depression-era drifters who are chasing a dream of owning their own land in the dusty ranch country of Central California. You might remember that Lenny is big as a bear, animal-like in his strength, but childlike in his intelligence and his utter dependence upon George. And you might remember that George cares for Lenny with striking devotion. The ending is profoundly beautiful and tragic. One of the great endings in American literature, in my opinion. And I wanted all my students to experience it personally before any discussion or analysis. I wanted them to be surprised and overwhelmed and moved, creating the opportunity for teaching much more than English. But all Harvard-Westlake ninth graders had been reading Of Mice and Men, and the word got out about what happens on the final pages. On the day before they were assigned to finish the book, I asked my class how many knew what was about to take place in the story. To my great dismay, every hand went guiltily up. Finish it anyway, I said, and try to forget what you know. The next day in class, in an attempt to create some kind of innocent encounter with the ending that would help my students to feel its effect, I decided to say nothing when they walked in, just to wait until they were all in their seats, turn off the lights, and play the last half hour of a well-done film version of the story, made faithfully from the novel in 1992, starring Gary Sinise as George and John Malkovich as Lenny. I had it all queued up to the right place. I flicked off the lights, and I started the film, but for some reason, the volume was ear-splittingly high. So I had to find the stop button in the dark and figure out how to turn it down. When I hit play again, somehow the volume had not changed. I hit stop again. The class laughed kindly, but the mood was unrecoverable. I had to get a student to help me with the technology. Finally got the film going properly, but by then I was certain that whatever effect might have been possible at the outset was completely gone. I sat glumly in the back while the projector cast its visible beam of light. Sinise and Malkovich spoke their lines, and the 15-year-olds I had hoped to inspire fidgeted in their seats. There was no forgetting that we were in English class, that it was Thursday, that there was a math test 6th period, that there had been a volume problem. The opportunity to be moved beyond the classroom and into the realm of the personal had slipped by. When it was over, I let the credits roll while the students zipped their backpacks. I didn't stop them. But then, from across the room, I heard a strange sound. Somebody was weeping. The screen went blank. I dismissed the class in the dark, and I found the one who was in tears. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded with embarrassment and tried to wipe her eyes. I'm sorry, she mumbled. It's just so sad. "Yes, it is," I said. "It is very, very sad. And it's supposed to make you cry, even when you know what is going to happen. That's the magic of it, when you feel it so much that it changes you." She nodded, and I could see that for one student, despite my pedagogical clumsiness, the novel had ceased to be a set of homework assignments and had, in fact, made a difference to who she is and will be. I have a lot to learn as a teacher, but I'm working hard at teaching both English and character, and I'm inspired every day by my students and colleagues here at Harvard-Westlake. I want to conclude my talk this evening by sharing something written about one of my colleagues by a member of the Harvard-Westlake class of 2009 as she was graduating from Amherst last spring. Given the opportunity to nominate one of her high school teachers for an award, she wrote this: "Most people can't really trace where their interests started. They'll say, 'I always loved to dance,' or 'I knew I was going to be a doctor since I was a little kid.' There's a sort of vague sense of where their passions stem from. That isn't the case for me. I can trace mine back to the Harvard-Westlake classroom on the first floor of Seaver Hall, where Mr. Klein taught AP US government. That's when I found the single most important, never forget for the rest of your life, teacher." Mr. Klein had an unusual way of teaching. Every class period would be filled with heated debates instead of traditional lectures. And when it was time for the next period, none of us would want to leave. Indeed, his teaching style made us want to learn just so we could be a little more like him. Mr. Klein's AP US government became something of a family. He would joke with us before class about who we were taking to semi-formal and prom and how the sports teams were faring. Though many of us were not friends prior to senior year, Mr. Klein brought us together. We began to hang out together outside of the classroom. We would continue our conversations into fifth period, eating lunch together on the terrace. Indeed, one of the most impressive aspects of Mr. Klein's teaching ability was that it was in no way limited to the classroom. He is interested not only in academic growth, but also in personal growth. Mr. Klein didn't just teach me about our government in that classroom. Mr. Klein taught me to think for myself. Quite a tribute. And kudos to Larry Klein, one of many here at Harvard-Westlake who is teaching much more than his subject. Amherst did, by the way, confer the award on Larry, flying him and his wife all the way to Massachusetts last May so that he could receive it in person at their graduation ceremony. I am guessing that every alumna or alumnus in this audience could write something like that about a teacher at Westlake or Harvard-Westlake. What strikes me, and I promise this is the last thing that I will say this evening, is what an opportunity there is in our students' readiness to connect, and what a responsibility. It is my vision that we see that responsibility as sacred and make the most of it for character as well as excellence. Thank you again for coming, for your belief in our school. Let's return to those lonely bartenders, and please give me a chance to say hello if we haven't shaken hands already. Thank you.